Imagine an interface that feels, well, less like cold, hard pixels, and maybe more like a living, breathing thing. Something that subtly bends light, maybe shimmers when you touch it, and moves with this, I don't know, effortless fluidity like water.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly the revolutionary concept Apple's calling liquid glass.
It's a pretty significant shift.
Our mission here is really to give you a shortcut to understanding this big new step in Apple's software design. We want to explore what this digital metamaterial actually is,
Right.
how it works under the hood, and maybe most importantly, why it's probably going to change the fundamental feel of apps across the whole ecosystem. You know, iPhone, Mac, the lot.
And we've dug into Apple's own developer presentations for this, pulling out the key stuff. So this is straight from the source of
Yeah, because you're getting the unfiltered story.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is that liquid glass isn't just, another visual refresh. It's not just pretty pixels. If you kind of look at Apple's history, their design philosophy, this feels like the result of decades of trying to make digital interaction feel less, well, artificial.
Or natural.
Yeah, more like interacting with the real world. It's a really big step towards kind of blurring those lines between physical and digital, making your device feel, I don't know, more organic, like an extension of you.
That's a huge goal, making something digital feel organic.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's unpack that. What is liquid glass exactly? What makes it a digital metamaterial? That sounds pretty fancy.
Yeah, it does. So at its heart, liquid glass is basically a new kind of layer. It's flexible, it's dynamic, and it's the foundation for apps and system stuff.
Right.
But instead of just like copying physical materials, it's designed to actively bend and shape light dynamically.
Actively bend light.
Yeah, and concentrate it. And crucially, it moves organically, almost like a lightweight liquid. And it's built to be super responsive to your touch and also to what apps are doing around it. So it's less about looking like glass, maybe, and more about behaving like a digital version of it.
That really does sound like a fundamental change in how things work on screen. And like you said, this probably didn't just appear overnight, right? It feels like Apple's been building towards that.
Oh, absolutely. You're spot on. It raises that question, where does it fit in? If you think back, macOS X, Aqua, those glassy buttons and docks.
Oh, yeah, I remember Aqua. Very bubbly.
Right. Then you had iOS 7 with the real-time blurs, adding that sense of depth. Then iPhone X gestures, much more fluid.
The dynamic island, too, that felt like a step.
Definitely. The dynamic island's flexibility, visionOS's whole immersive interface. Liquid glass sort of takes all those learnings, all those tries at making digital feel tangible and pulls them together. It's like the next logical step, maybe the biggest one yet in that journey.
And it really seems timed perfectly with how the hardware looks now, too.
Yeah.
The screens are more rounded, edge-to-edge, more immersive. Liquid glass seems to just fit.
It totally does. Visually, you see it in these rounded, floating forms that kind of nestle right into the curves of the newer devices. And those shapes, they're specifically designed to feel easy to tap, friendly to touch. They even relate to the sort of natural geometry of our fingers. It's all about making the software feel like it just belongs on the physical thing you're holding, that harmony.
Okay, so we've talked about what it is, this new digital material. But the magic, as you put it, seems to be in how it looks and moves. It's not just see-through, it actually sculpts light. Which brings us to lensing. What is that? Why is it important?
Right, lensing. It's actually something we get intuitively from the real world. Think about looking through, I don't know, a glass of water or even a simple magnifying glass.
Okay.
We just know how the warping and bending of light tells us about the object's presence, its shape, maybe even if it's moving. Liquid glass uses those same visual cues, the ones we already understand instinctively.
Ah, okay. So it's tapping into how our brains already work.
Exactly. It doesn't just scatter light like, say, frosted glass. It dynamically bends, shapes, and even concentrates light in real time. That's how it creates separation, makes things feel layered.
Right.
Content underneath can still shine through clearly, but the control itself feels distinct, tangible. It's almost like a little psychological trick using how we perceive light and depth to make digital controls feel genuinely physical, grounded.
So it's much smarter than just a blur effect. It's using physics, or our understanding of it, to make pixels feel real. And the transitions, if it behaves like a liquid, They must be super smooth.
Oh yeah, incredibly smooth. When things appear or disappear, they don't just fade in or out. They sort of materialize and dematerialize by gradually changing how much they bend that light, how much lensing occurs.
Yeah.
It keeps this optical integrity, so even during animation, the way light interacts stays consistent. It always looks like liquid glass, not just, an animation fading away.
And it's not just the look, it's the movement, too. You mentioned fluid motion.
Yeah.
How does that play out?
That's super important because the look and the motion were designed together as one thing. We all have a feel for liquids, right? How they move smoothly, responsively, without effort.
Yeah.
Liquid glass taps into that. It responds to you touching it by instantly flexing, kind of energizing with light right where you touch.
Yeah.
It makes the interface feel really responsive, satisfying, alive almost.
Like the interface has a pulse.
Exactly. It has this inherent sort of gel-like flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
It communicates that it's transient, malleable, moving right along with what you're doing, which kind of matches how we think and move dynamically, always changing. For instance, elements can temporarily lift up into the liquid glass when you interact.
Oh, interesting.
So the resting state stays visually quiet, but then it comes alive when you touch it. And sometimes a transparent sort of liquid lens can pop up to show a value under a control, magnifying it just slightly as you interact.
That sounds like an interface that's really, truly aware and adapting constantly.
Yeah.
So how does it handle different situations, different contexts within an app?
Yeah.
Does it just adapt visually, or is there more to it?
Well, what's really cool is how it reacts to the constantly changing environments in modern apps. As you move around, it can dynamically morph between controls.
Right.
Yeah, while keeping this idea of a single floating plane. Think of it like one continuous sheet of super thin, flexible glass over everything.
Okay.
When you open a menu or tap a button, that same sheet just sort of ripples and reshapes into the new control, rather than a whole new piece of UI just appearing from nowhere.
Ah, I see. So it maintains that continuity.
Exactly. It keeps that fluid feeling across the whole app. Transitions feel incredibly seamless because the controls are always shape-shifting. Imagine tapping a menu button and the little bubble just pops open right there where you tapped, showing the content inside. It feels very direct.
So it's always shifting, adapting for clarity. It sounds incredibly complex behind the scenes, but it's meant to be automatic for me, the user.
That's the goal, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the brilliance. It's designed to stay totally clear, letting the content underneath show through, but it's also constantly, subtly changing to make sure things are legible and properly separated.
How does it manage that?
Liquid glass is made of adaptive layers. Unlike older materials that just had a fixed look, each layer here continuously adapts based on what's behind it.
Huh.
So, for example, the shadows might get stronger over text to make the glass pop out more, or the tint and dynamic range shift so buttons always stay easy to read. It can even switch between light and dark modes independently to feel right in any context.
Cool.
And when it flexes to a larger size, like a menu popping out from a toolbar, it simulates being thicker, deeper shadows, more pronounced lensing again, all for better legibility.
It really sounds like Apple's focused on making this experience consistent. Does this liquid glass material keep that unified feel across all the platforms, iPhone, iPad, Mac?
Yes, absolutely. That's a huge part of it. Liquid glass is fundamental to creating that unified design language everywhere.
Okay.
These layers form a distinct functional layer for your controls, your navigation always floating above everything else, leaving this nice, expansive canvas for your actual content.
Right.
On bigger screens, the glass controls nestle perfectly into the rounded corners of windows, keeping that visual harmony with the physical device. And for bigger things like sidebars, the appearance of the glass is even affected by the ambient environment inside the app. Light from colorful content nearby can subtly spill onto its surface.
Like in the real world.
Exactly. It reinforces its context, its elevation, just like a physical object would. Floating sidebars on iPad and Mac really enhance that immersion, and together with tab bars, they create this cohesive, consistent way to navigate that just scales fluidly across all the different devices.
That's a massive step towards a truly consistent feel, no matter what Apple device you pick up. But what happens when content is scrolling really fast underneath these glass elements? How does it stay legible then?
Ah, right. That's where scroll edge effects come into play. They work together with liquid glass to keep things separate and readable, especially with dynamic content zipping by.
Okay, how do they work?
They're adaptive too. So as content scrolls under a glass element, the effect gently sort of dissolves that content into the background. It visually lifts the glass up away from the moving stuff so titles and things stay crystal clear.
Mm.
And if darker content scrolls underneath and the glass flips to its dark style, the effect intelligently switches to just a subtle dimming to make sure there's still good contrast.
Smart.
Yeah, and for things that are pinned, like maybe column headers under a toolbar, there's a hard style effect, which gives an extra bit of visual separation, just to make sure those important bits are always distinct.
So, okay, if I'm a designer or a developer, it sounds like a lot of this sophistication is just built in, which is great.
It is.
But, with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Mm.
Are there still pitfalls designers need to watch out for, even with all this automation?
That's a really good question, and yeah, it's crucial for designing well with liquid glass. The real magic is its holistic design. The light play, the depth, the adaptive changes. They're all layers in this complex system that mostly just works automatically.
Right.
Like the highlights layer responds to the shape and light sources. Light even moves when you do things like lock or unlock your device, subtly defining the silhouette. It can even respond to the device moving physically.
Wait, really? It responds to physical motion?
Yeah, making liquid glass actually aware of its position in the real world, it's pretty wild.
Wow. That's a huge leap in interface awareness.
It really is. And shadows play a big part too, grounding elements. Their opacity changes, smartly increases over text for separation, lowers over light backgrounds,
Right.
and when you touch it, it illuminates from within. A glow spreads from your fingertips through the element, even to nearby liquid glass bits. It really makes the interface feel alive. And all these layers work together to maintain the UI hierarchy, keep the focus clear, like liquid glass visually recedes when a window loses focus on Mac or iPad. And again, all this sophistication, it comes built in. These behaviors are automatic for developers.
That's got to be a massive relief for developers, knowing so much is handled automatically.
Yeah.
But with all this transparency and layering, can it become too much? Are there common mistakes designers might make?
You've absolutely hit on a key design rule there. While it might be tempting to slap liquid glass on everything, it's really best reserved for that navigation layer, the stuff floating above your main content.
Okay.
If you were to, say, make a whole list or table view out of liquid glass, it would just start competing with everything else. It muddies the hierarchy for the user. The content layer needs to stay distinct, clear.
Right. Less is more, especially with layering glass on glass. I think Apple actually mentioned a glass on glass rule.
Exactly. Stacking liquid glass elements is generally a bad idea. It makes the interface look cluttered, confusing. Instead, if you need to put something on top of liquid glass, you'd use fills, transparency, vibrancy effects to make the top element feel like a thin overlay, not another piece of glass.
Makes sense. And are there different types, like different flavors of liquid glass designers can pick from?
Yeah, there are two main variants, regular and clear. And the big rule is never mix them within the same element.
Okay, regular.
Regular is the workhorse. It's the most versatile, the one you'll probably see most. It gives you all the visual tricks, all the adaptive effects, makes sure things are legible no matter the context, works great at any size over any content. It's the default, really.
And clear. When would you use that one?
Clear is, well, clear. It's permanently more transparent, so it lets the richness of the content underneath really come through. But, and this is critical, because it's so transparent, it needs a dimming layer built in behind it to keep things legible.
Ah, okay, so conditions apply.
Definitely. You'd really only use clear if, 1, the element is over really rich media content, 2, that content layer won't look bad with a bit of dimming behind the glass, and 3, any text or symbols on the clear glass are bold and bright. It's for that super immersive, content-first feel, but only when the conditions are just right for clarity.
So legibility was obviously a massive consideration through all of this design work.
Oh, absolutely central. Little things like nav bars and tab bars constantly adapt. They even flip between light and dark styles based on the background, just to make sure you can always tell them apart.
Right.
Bigger things like menus or sidebars, they adapt too, but they don't flip light-dark because that could get really distracting on a large surface.
Okay.
And the symbols and icons on top of liquid glass, they also flip automatically from light to dark, mirroring what the glass itself is doing to maintain contrast. That just happens with the regular variant.
And I heard something about a new way of tinting elements that works with this glass.
Yeah.
How's that different from just picking a color?
Yeah, this is another pretty cool innovation. Liquid glass brings in a new way to tint elements that really respects the materials principles and, again, maximizes legibility.
How so?
Instead of just applying a flat solid color, this new technique generates a whole range of tones. And these tones are intelligently mapped to the brightness of the content underneath the glass.
Interesting.
It's inspired by how actual colored glass works in the real world, how it changes hue, brightness, saturation depending on the light and what's behind it. It makes it feel much more physical.
Right.
It really helps with legibility and contrast too, and it's natively compatible with all the other glass behaviors. Solid fills, on the other hand, they kind of break that visual character of the glass. This new tinting makes elements feel more transparent, more grounded.
So if a designer wants to add color, they shouldn't just slap a solid fill on a glass element. There's this specific, smarter way using this new tinting.
Exactly. And the guidance is really to use tinting only to emphasize primary elements and key actions.
Don't overdo it.
Right. Avoid tinting everything, because then it just gets confusing, nothing stands out. If you want to bring more color into your app generally, do it in the content layer below the glass.
Okay.
A good example of where tinting works well might be like a view bag button in a shopping app. Making that primary action button tinted, maybe red or whatever the brand color is, makes it pop out clearly on the glass without feeling wrong.
And I guess the content layer itself is pretty critical for avoiding visual noise with all this transparency going on.
Absolutely key. Especially in steady states, like when an app first launches or isn't being actively scrolled, designers should really try to avoid content overlapping with liquid glass elements then.
Ow.
Just reposition or maybe scale the content slightly so it sits clearly below or beside the glass, maintaining that nice separation. It just ensures visual clarity right from the start.
And what about accessibility? Does liquid glass handle things like reduced transparency or increased contrast automatically?
Yes, that's a huge strength. There are several built-in accessibility features that act as modifiers on the material itself.
Like what?
Well, there's reduced transparency, which makes the glass crostier, obscuring more of the content behind it for people who find the transparency distracting.
Okay.
There's increased contrast, which makes the glass elements mostly black or white with really strong contrasting borders. And reduced motion, which tones down the intensity of the effects and turns off the more sort of elastic, bouncy properties for users who might be sensitive to motion.
And developers don't need to do extra work for that.
Nope. What's really great is these are available automatically. Whenever a user turns on those settings at the system level, liquid glass just adapts. It ensures inclusivity right out of the box.
So wrapping up this deep dive then, liquid glass isn't just a visual tweak. It feels like it's bringing this truly unified design language across all of Apple's platforms, right?
Yeah.
Seamlessly blending the hardware and the software.
Yeah, and fundamentally introducing a more fluid, more dynamic, more immersive way to interact, something that feels, well, more connected to our natural world.
What's really profound, I think, is that this isn't just an update. It feels like the start of a whole new chapter in Apple's visual and interaction design. It fundamentally changes how apps look, and maybe more importantly, how they feel for you, the person using them every day.
It really does.
It's kind of incredible to think that software can now dynamically bend light and behave like a liquid. What does that even imply for the future? You know, the boundaries between our physical world and our digital world. How might these metamaterials, as they call them, keep evolving? How might they influence how we perceive digital spaces, making them feel maybe increasingly tangible, increasingly responsive in the years ahead?